Aiden Carter sat quietly at his desk, focused on solving the math problems on his worksheet. He was a bright 10-year-old boy, known for his curiosity and kind heart. His curly black hair bounced slightly as he leaned forward, deep in thought. Ms. Reynolds, the teacher, stood at the front of the class, explaining the lesson. She was strict and didn't like when students got distracted. As she spoke, her sharp eyes caught Jaden running his fingers through his hair absent-mindedly. "Jaden, pay attention," she snapped. Jaden quickly put his hands down and nodded, embarrassed. The other kids glanced at him, some smirking, but he stayed quiet. He didn't mean to be rude. He just liked the way his hair felt. Ms. Reynolds sighed and walked over to his desk. She picked up a bottle of clear liquid from her drawer, something she often used to fix classroom materials. She looked at Jaden's hair, shook her head, and without warning, poured the liquid directly onto his head. The classroom froze. Jaden felt something cold and sticky seep into his hair. He blinked in confusion. At first, he thought it was water. But as the thick, glue-like substance hardened, his eyes widened in shock. His heart pounded. "Ms. Reynolds, what did you do?" One student whispered, covering their mouth in disbelief. "That should teach you to stop playing with your hair in class," Ms. Reynolds said, dusting off her hands as if she had done something completely normal. Jaden's breath caught in his throat. He reached up to touch his head, and panic set in when his fingers stuck to his own hair. It was glue. Real glue. The other students gasped. A few even stood up, horrified. Jaden jumped from his seat and ran toward the door, his hands still tangled in his now hardening curls. Tears stung his eyes. "Wait, you can't just leave in the middle of class," Ms. Reynolds called after him, but Jaden didn't stop. He dashed to the bathroom, looking at himself in the mirror. His beautiful curls were clumped together, stiff like plastic. He pulled at them, but they wouldn't move. His head ached from the tightening glue. His best friend, Marcus, ran in behind him. "Dude, what did she do to you?" Marcus whispered, his voice filled with shock and anger. I don't know," Jaden stammered, blinking back tears. "I don't understand why she did this to me." A girl named Ava ran to the front office to tell the staff what happened. In the hallway, whispers spread like wildfire. A teacher had just poured glue on a student's head. In the office, a secretary picked up the phone. The principal had to hear about this. But what Ms. Reynolds didn't know was that Jaden's father was the principal. And when he found out, things were about to change forever. Jaden stood in front of the bathroom mirror, his heart pounding. His fingers were stuck in his hair, trapped by the glue. No matter how hard he pulled, his curls wouldn't move. The sticky mess had turned his once soft hair into hard, stiff clumps. Tears burned in his eyes, but he tried not to cry. He didn't want to look weak. Marcus, his best friend, stood beside him, looking both shocked and angry. "Man, I can't believe she did that," Marcus said, shaking his head. Jaden swallowed hard. "What am I supposed to do? My hair." He stopped, his voice breaking. He never felt so humiliated in his life. Marcus ran to the sink, grabbing handfuls of water and splashing them on Jaden's hair. But it didn't work. The glue was too strong. A knock on the door made them both jump. "Jaden." It was Ava's voice. She had gone to get help. "Come to the office. The principal knows what happened." Jaden froze. The principal. His father. His chest tightened. His dad always told him to be strong, to never let people walk over him. But this, what would his dad say? Slowly, Jaden wiped his face and walked out of the bathroom. Marcus followed, looking ready for a fight. The two boys walked down the hallway, students whispering as they passed. When they entered the office, Jaden locked eyes with his father, Mr. Carter. Mr. Carter was a tall man with a calm but serious face. He was known for being fair and strict, but right now, his face was unreadable. His eyes landed on Jaden's hair, and they darkened. "What happened?" Mr. Carter asked, his voice steady but firm. Jaden opened his mouth, but before he could speak, Ava burst out angrily. "Ms. Reynolds did it. She poured glue on his hair." The room fell silent. The school nurse, standing nearby, gasped. A few teachers exchanged shocked looks. Mr. Carter's face did not change, but the air around him felt heavier. "Jaden, is this true?" he asked, his voice low. Jaden nodded slowly. "She said I was distracted," he whispered. "Then she poured it on my head." Everyone saw. A long pause filled the office. Then Mr. Carter took a deep breath and stood up. "Where is Ms. Reynolds now?" he asked, looking at the secretary. "In her classroom," the woman replied nervously. "Send her to my office." "Now," he said. His voice was calm, but everyone could tell he was furious. Jaden watched as the secretary rushed out. For the first time since this happened, he didn't feel alone. His dad had his back, and Ms. Reynolds had no idea what was coming next. The office was silent, except for the soft tapping of footsteps. Everyone waited for Ms. Reynolds to arrive, but no one spoke. Jaden's father, Mr. Carter, stood tall, his arms crossed over his chest. His calm expression was only a mask for the anger bubbling underneath. Jaden sat in a chair, his hands still trembling. He stared down at his feet, trying to keep it together. His heart still raced, his mind spinning with what had just happened. How could Ms. Reynolds do this to him? The door opened, and Ms. Reynolds stepped inside. Her face was pale, her eyes darting around the room nervously. She had no idea what she was walking into. "Mr. Carter, you asked to see me," she said, her voice a little shaky. Mr. Carter didn't answer right away. Instead, he pointed at Jaden. "Look at your student, Ms. Reynolds," he said, his voice controlled but with a firm edge. "Look at what you've done to him." Ms. Reynolds turned toward Jaden, her eyes widening when she saw his hair. It was hard to miss. The glue was still visible in clumps, and some of his curls had been completely ruined. She stepped back, her mouth opening and closing in shock. She started, but Jaden's father cut her off. "How could you think this was okay?" Mr. Carter's voice was steady, but the anger in it was impossible to miss. "Why would you pour glue in his hair?" Ms. Reynolds swallowed. She hadn't expected this. She probably thought she could explain herself, but the weight of the situation was far too serious for an easy excuse. "Jaden wasn't listening in class," she began, her voice trembling. "I just wanted to teach him a lesson. I thought it would be a way to get his attention." Jaden's father narrowed his eyes. "So you thought that humiliating him in front of the class was the solution?" Ms. Reynolds looked away, her face flushing with embarrassment. She had no answer for that. Mr. Carter's eyes were hard now. "Do you know who you just did this to? You poured glue in my son's hair." The word hung in the air, heavy with the realization. Ms. Reynolds' face went pale as she finally understood. I'm so sorry," she stammered. I didn't know he was your son." Jaden's father's jaw tightened. "It doesn't matter who his father is. What matters is that you crossed a line. You hurt a child. My child." Jaden sat up straighter in his chair. He felt a wave of relief wash over him. His dad was standing up for him, just like he always promised. It didn't matter that Ms. Reynolds was a teacher or that she was older. What she did was wrong, and his father was making sure everyone knew it. "Do you realize what you've done?" Mr. Carter continued. "You've humiliated Jaden in front of his classmates. You've made him feel small and powerless. That's not how we treat children here. Not ever." Ms. Reynolds opened her mouth to say something, but she didn't. She couldn't defend herself. The school nurse entered the office at that moment, her eyes wide with shock as she saw the situation unfolding. I'm afraid the glue might cause damage if we don't get it out soon," the nurse said softly, looking at Jaden's hair. Mr. Carter nodded. "We'll handle that. First, Ms. Reynolds needs to understand the gravity of her actions. The room felt heavy with silence as the weight of what had happened began to sink in for everyone. Ms. Reynolds stood in the office, still trying to process what was happening. Her hands were trembling slightly, and she avoided looking directly at Mr. Carter. The room was quiet, except for the soft hum of the air conditioner. Jaden sat in his chair, still upset, but now feeling the tiniest bit of comfort knowing his father was with him. "Ms. Reynolds, I don't think you understand the seriousness of what you did," Mr. Carter said, his voice steady but full of concern. "You put my son through something no child should ever experience." Ms. Reynolds straightened up, her face a mix of confusion and defensiveness. She had never intended to cause harm, but her actions had clearly crossed a line. "I didn't mean for things to go this far," she began, her voice shaky. "I was just trying to get Jaden to pay attention. He's been so distracted lately, and I thought maybe this would be a way to make him focus." Jaden's eyes widened. "You thought pouring glue in my hair would help me focus?" he asked, his voice quiet but firm. "That's not helping, that's hurting." Ms. Reynolds hesitated, her gaze shifting from Jaden to his father. She could feel the pressure building. I just thought, you know, he was always playing with his hair, distracting everyone around him. It was bothering the class." She let out a deep breath, her eyes looking down at the floor. "I didn't think it would cause any harm." Mr. Carter shook his head. "Did you think about how Jaden might feel in front of his classmates? How embarrassed he would be?" His voice softened, but the disappointment was clear. Ms. Reynolds bit her lip. "I didn't consider that, no." She looked up at Jaden again, her eyes full of regret. "I'm sorry, Jaden. I didn't mean to hurt you." But Jaden didn't feel better hearing her apology. The damage had already been done. He had to walk into class that day with his classmates laughing and whispering about him. And now, even though Ms. Reynolds apologized, he still couldn't fix the pain it caused. "I don't think an apology is enough here," Mr. Carter said quietly. "What you did was not just a mistake. It was something that left a lasting mark on my son. This is not just about hair. It's about respect. You disrespected him." Ms. Reynolds opened her mouth, but no words came out. She was speechless now, fully realizing that she had made a mistake far bigger than she could fix with words alone. The room fell silent again, the tension hanging in the air. "I think it's time to take the next step," Mr. Carter said, his voice calm but stern. "We need to address this properly. Jaden needs to be treated fairly, and this school needs to make sure something like this doesn't happen again." Jaden looked up at his father, feeling a wave of relief wash over him. His dad wasn't letting this slide. He wasn't going to let anyone get away with what happened. Ms. Reynolds took a deep breath, her face flushed with shame. I'll accept whatever consequences come my way. I understand now how wrong this was." But as she spoke those words, Jaden couldn't help but wonder, what would happen next? What would the school do to fix this? Would anyone truly be held responsible for what had happened to him? The answers would come soon enough. But for now, Jaden knew one thing for sure. He wasn't alone. The office was filled with tension as Ms. Reynolds stood there, still trying to explain herself. Her voice faltered with each word, but there was no taking back what she had done. Jaden, his hair still stiff from the glue, couldn't shake the feeling of humiliation. It wasn't just about his hair. It was the way his classmates had seen him, the whispers and the giggles, the way he'd felt small and powerless. Mr. Carter was silent for a moment, letting Ms. Reynolds' words sink in. He knew that the situation was serious. He needed to understand everything before he could make a decision. "Ms. Reynolds," Mr. Carter began, his voice calm but firm, "you keep saying you didn't mean to hurt Jaden, but that doesn't change what happened. You need to take responsibility for your actions." "I do," she replied quickly, her eyes filled with regret. "I'm so sorry, I really am. I didn't know what else to do." Jaden shook his head slowly. "You could have talked to me. You could have told me to stop messing with my hair. There were other ways." Ms. Reynolds opened her mouth, but no words came out. She had no response. Nothing could explain why she chose to pour glue into his hair. Nothing could make up for the way she made him feel. The silence in the office was thick, as everyone waited for something to happen. Just then, another teacher came into the room. It was Mrs. Allen, one of the other staff members. She had a concerned look on her face. "Mr. Carter, I think you need to hear this," she said, her voice low. Jaden's heart skipped a beat. What was going on now? Mrs. Allen stepped closer to Mr. Carter and handed him a folder. "We've been hearing from other students," she said quietly. "There have been a few complaints about Ms. Reynolds' behavior over the last few months. Some of the children felt uncomfortable with the way she treated them." Jaden's father opened the folder and scanned through the papers. His expression grew more serious as he read. It wasn't just about Jaden. There were multiple reports from other students saying they felt targeted or humiliated by Ms. Reynolds in different ways. Jaden couldn't believe what he was hearing. He wasn't the only one. There were others who had felt hurt by the same teacher. Mrs. Allen continued. Some students even mentioned that she would often make comments about certain students' hair or clothing, and others felt they couldn't speak up because they were afraid. Jaden looked at his father, his eyes wide. The realization hit him hard. This wasn't just a mistake. This was part of a larger pattern. Ms. Reynolds wasn't just treating him unfairly. She had been treating other students badly too. Mr. Carter closed the folder, his face a mix of anger and determination. "I'm going to make sure this gets handled," he said firmly. "No one should feel afraid to come to school. No one should feel like they're not safe." Ms. Reynolds took a shaky breath, her face pale as she began to understand just how serious this situation had become. The truth was out now, and there was no turning back. Jaden sat quietly, his thoughts racing. Was this how other students felt too? His dad turned to Ms. Reynolds. "You will be put on leave while the school investigates further, and we will be discussing this with the school board." Jaden's heart felt a little lighter, knowing his father was taking charge. The truth had come out, and things were beginning to change. The school would have to listen to what had happened, not just to him, but to everyone who had been treated unfairly. After the meeting in the office, the news about what happened to Jaden spread quickly throughout the school. It wasn't just about him anymore. It became a community issue. Parents, teachers, and students began to talk about what had happened, and soon enough, everyone was aware of Ms. Reynolds' actions. Jaden's father, Mr. Carter, was determined to take action. He knew it was not enough to just handle the situation within the walls of the school. This needed to be bigger. It needed to send a message to the entire school district that unfair treatment and disrespect wouldn't be tolerated. That afternoon, Mr. Carter gathered the school staff and called for a meeting. Word spread quickly, and soon, the school board was involved. Jaden watched his father take charge with calm authority. It was clear to everyone that this was no ordinary situation. It was a matter of fairness and justice for the children. Parents started showing up at the school, concerned about what had happened to Jaden. Many of them expressed shock that something like this could happen at all. Some parents shared their own experiences with teachers who had treated their children unfairly, especially when it came to how they looked or how they behaved. One mother, Mrs. Thompson, who had a daughter in the same grade as Jaden, spoke up. "My daughter came home crying once because a teacher said her hair was too messy for class. She was just being a child, but that comment hurt her deeply." Another parent, Mr. Lee, who had a son in the 3rd grade, nodded in agreement. "There's been talk among the parents. Some kids are afraid to speak up when they feel treated unfairly. They don't know how to stand up for themselves." The community was waking up to the idea that small actions could have a big impact on children's lives. These weren't just stories about bad teachers. They were about students who needed support and respect. Jaden's mom, Angela Carter, was also active in the discussions. She made sure to tell the other parents that the issue wasn't just about her son. It was about all the children who had been treated unfairly. "We need to teach our kids to speak up," she said firmly. But we also need to make sure they have the right support when they do. The school board began organizing meetings with both parents and teachers to discuss how to prevent things like this from happening again. There was talk of adding sensitivity training for teachers, especially about how to treat students of different backgrounds with kindness and respect. At the same time, media outlets started picking up the story. News outlets began reporting on the incident, bringing even more attention to the situation. Soon, reporters were interviewing Jaden's family, asking them how they felt about the school's response. Jaden wasn't sure how to feel about all the attention, but he knew one thing for sure: his story was being heard. As the days passed, more people reached out to Jaden and his family, offering their support. Teachers, students, and even strangers sent messages of encouragement. Jaden began to feel a sense of pride in his strength. He had spoken up, and now things were changing. Jaden still wasn't sure when he'd be ready to go back to school, but for the first time in a long while, he felt hopeful. The community was standing with him, and that gave him the strength to keep going. As the news about Jaden spread, things started moving quickly. It wasn't just about the school anymore. The incident had caught the attention of not only the local community, but also lawyers and civil rights groups. People were talking, and they were demanding answers. Jaden's family decided to take action. They couldn't just let this slide. His father, Mr. Carter, knew that what had happened wasn't a small issue. It was a legal matter now. Jaden had been hurt, and the school needed to take responsibility for that. The first step was to meet with a lawyer. Jaden's family hired Ms. Parker, a well-known civil rights attorney who specialized in education cases. Ms. Parker had experience with discrimination and mistreatment in schools, and she immediately understood the seriousness of what had happened to Jaden. "We are going to make sure your son's voice is heard," Ms. Parker said to Mr. and Mrs. Carter as they sat together in her office. "This is not just about getting an apology. This is about making sure no child is ever treated this way again." Jaden listened quietly as his parents spoke to Ms. Parker. It was starting to feel real. He had always thought that school was a place where he could learn and feel safe, but now it felt like the walls were closing in on him. The idea of a legal battle was overwhelming, but he knew this was important. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for all the kids who might face the same thing in the future. Soon, Jaden's family received a formal letter from the school district saying that they were conducting an internal investigation into the incident. It was clear the school was trying to act quickly to avoid further problems, but Jaden's parents weren't satisfied with just an investigation. They needed action. Ms. Parker started preparing a case to present to the school board. She gathered testimonies from other students who had witnessed the incident, as well as from parents who had seen similar mistreatment in the past. She also asked for statements from teachers who had spoken up about Ms. Reynolds' behavior. The evidence was starting to pile up. Jaden's mom, Angela, spent her time speaking to other parents, asking them to share their stories and join the fight. She spoke at community meetings, encouraging parents to be more involved in their children's lives at school. The more voices they had, the stronger their message would be. As the investigation continued, Ms. Reynolds was placed on administrative leave. This meant she could not work or teach at the school while the investigation was happening. It was a small victory, but it was a sign that the school was taking the issue seriously. Jaden's friends at school were incredibly supportive. Marcus and Ava often checked in on him, making sure he was okay. They even helped him with homework when he wasn't in the mood to focus. It was comforting to know that they had his back. Despite all the support, Jaden couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Justice. He didn't feel like he could fully move on until he knew that no one else would have to go through what he did. The legal battle was just beginning, but Jaden's family was determined to see it through. They knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but they were ready. They would fight for what was right. Weeks passed, and the investigation into Ms. Reynolds' actions moved forward. Jaden's family stayed focused, pushing for justice every step of the way. It wasn't easy. There were many meetings, long discussions with the lawyer, and plenty of waiting. But through it all, they never gave up. They knew they had to keep fighting for what was right, not just for Jaden, but for all the other students who had suffered in silence. Finally, the day arrived when the school board would meet to announce the results of the investigation. Jaden and his parents sat nervously in the living room, waiting for the phone call. It felt like time had slowed down as they stared at the clock on the wall, each minute feeling like an hour. Then the phone rang. Mr. Carter answered it immediately, his voice tense. "Hello?" "Mr. Carter." The voice on the other end said, "We have completed the investigation, and we have reached a decision." Jaden's heart pounded. This was it. The school board had reviewed all the evidence, the testimonies from the other students, the reports from teachers, and the statements from parents. They had taken into account not only what had happened to Jaden, but also the pattern of behavior that had been brought to light during the investigation. Ms. Reynolds' actions had been unprofessional and unacceptable, the school board concluded. They were not only inappropriate but also against the very values that the school district was supposed to uphold. The school board made their decision clear. Ms. Reynolds would be fired. She would no longer be allowed to teach in the district. The board also announced that they would be implementing new training programs for all staff to ensure that something like this would never happen again. When Mr. Carter told Jaden what had happened, he felt a wave of relief wash over him. It wasn't the easiest victory, but it was a victory. Ms. Reynolds wouldn't be teaching anymore, and the school was going to change for the better. "I'm proud of you, Jaden," Mr. Carter said softly, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "You stood up for yourself, and now things are different for everyone. You made a difference." Jaden felt his chest swell with pride. For the first time since the incident, he felt stronger. It wasn't just about the punishment for Ms. Reynolds. It was about the fact that justice had been served. The decision also sent a powerful message to the whole community. No one is above accountability, and everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. In the days that followed, Jaden noticed a change in the way people treated him at school. His classmates seemed more supportive, more understanding. Teachers were more attentive, and the overall atmosphere at school felt safer. It was as if the whole school had learned something important about kindness and fairness. Jaden's friends, Marcus and Ava, were thrilled when they heard the news. "You did it, man," Marcus cheered. "You stood up for all of us." "I'm just glad it's over," Jaden said, smiling. "But I'm also proud of what we did. We made sure no one would have to go through what I went through." As Jaden walked into school the next day, he felt different. He wasn't just the kid with the messed up hair anymore. He was the kid who changed everything. The kid who fought for what was right, even when it seemed impossible. And that made all the difference. The weeks that followed were some of the most difficult, yet rewarding, weeks of Jaden's life. School had changed. The air felt lighter now, filled with hope and possibility. Jaden's classmates, who had once whispered behind his back, now came to him with smiles of support. It was like a weight had been lifted from the entire school, and everyone was beginning to feel the change. Jaden still couldn't believe how much had happened. When he first ran to the bathroom that day with glue stuck in his hair, he never imagined his story would become something bigger than just an embarrassing moment. But now, with everything that had unfolded, he realized how powerful it was to stand up for yourself. Though Ms. Reynolds had been fired and the school had promised changes, it was Jaden's bravery that made the difference. He had been the one to speak up. He had been the one to face the fear of embarrassment and uncertainty head-on. And now, things were better. One afternoon, Jaden sat down with his parents to talk about what had happened. "Dad, Mom," he said, his voice calm but full of emotion, "I didn't know I could make a difference like this." His father smiled proudly. "Jaden, sometimes we don't realize the impact we can have. You've done something amazing here." Jaden thought about it for a moment. "I never wanted this to be about me. I just didn't want anyone else to feel like I did that day." Angela Carter, his mother, took his hand. "You've made sure no one else will, and that's the most important thing." At school, things were different. The teachers had started new sensitivity training programs, and the students were more aware of how to treat each other with kindness and respect. Jaden's story was a reminder to everyone, teachers and students alike, that everyone deserves respect, no matter who they are or what they look like. Jaden also began to speak out more about the importance of kindness and standing up for what's right. He joined a school group dedicated to creating a positive school environment. It wasn't easy for Jaden at first. Speaking in front of others wasn't something he had ever done before, but the confidence he had gained from facing such a difficult situation made him want to help others feel safe at school too. One day, at a school assembly, Jaden was asked to speak. He was nervous at first, but as he walked up to the microphone, he remembered what his father had told him. "You have a voice, Jaden. Use it to help others." Jaden took a deep breath, looked out at the students, and began. "I want to talk about something important. It's about respect, respect for everyone. I went through something difficult, but because people listened, because people cared, things changed. I want to make sure that no one ever has to feel the way I felt." His words hit home. Students and teachers listened carefully, and there was a sense of unity in the air. They knew that change was possible, and it had already begun with Jaden's strength. As Jaden walked out of the assembly, Marcus and Ava were waiting for him, both of them grinning. "You did great, Jaden," Marcus said, clapping him on the back. "I knew you had it in you," Ava added, her smile wide. Jaden smiled back, feeling proud of himself. He had not only changed his own life, but had also helped make his school a better place. It wasn't about the glue or the mistake that had started it all. It was about how he had stood up for what was right, and how his bravery had led to a new beginning for everyone.